Tonight, the coronavirus rippling across the globe, sending shockwaves through the global economy.
You may ask about the coronavirus, which is very well under control in our country.
The president optimistic, even as health officials call the spread in the United States inevitable.
Plus,
because they're trying to defend something that's fundamentally indefensible.
Born Alive, the bill to protect abortion survivors, heading for a Senate vote.
And the president standing with Catholics under scrutiny in a new poll. This ahead of tonight's Democratic presidential debate, all sights set on Bernie Sanders.
But it's incredibly important.
The Defense Department is asking for hundreds of billions of dollars for military readiness.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The global scramble to contain the coronavirus. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jennifer Wishon. Tonight, health officials are warning Americans to prepare for a potential outbreak in the U.S., calling the spread of the coronavirus inevitable.
This as the number of infections around the world is surging, even as health officials prepare for a possible pandemic.
CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us now. Ben, so the White House is asking Congress for $2.5 billion to combat the outbreak?
Jennifer, John, yeah, you're right. The rapid spread spooked financial markets, and international travel will likely face further restrictions. President Trump, Jennifer, as you were talking about, is on a 19-hour flight back from India, where he announced the U.S. is close to a vaccine. 80,000 cases worldwide is sparking an urgent race to stop the global spread.
You may ask about the coronavirus, which is very well under control in our country.
Trump announced a $2.5 billion request in funding to fight the virus.
$2.5 billion we're putting in. I see that Chuck Schumer criticized that he thought it should be more. And if I gave more, he'd say it should be less.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the request long overdue, but added it's completely inadequate to the scale of this emergency. The White House says the funds are for vaccines, treatment, and protective equipment.
They have studied it. They know very much. In fact, we're very close to a vaccine.
But infections are surging in Italy, Iran, and South Korea. Health officials fear it could turn into a global pandemic as they now try to figure out how the virus is transmitted.
It's time to do everything you would do in preparing for a pandemic.
Now, scientists at the drug maker Moderna are expected to start clinical trials in about 2 months on a potential vaccine, which President Trump talked about at the top of the newscast. The outbreak even sparked fears on Wall Street as the Dow plunged 871 today. But as you heard President Trump, he said the situation is, quote, under control here in the U.S. He made those comments as he wrapped up his trip to India, where he raised the issue of religious freedom with the Prime Minister there. Pastor Jack Graham tweeted, "Thank you, President Trump, for speaking strongly to the Prime Minister of India regarding religious liberty for Christians and others. Trump has been the most consistent supporter of freedom for people of faith in the history of U.S. presidents." Now, India is the 10th most dangerous country in the world for Christians, according to Open Doors USA. It is even reported that Christians in India face horrific levels of violence, with thousands of attacks taking place in the country every single year. Jennifer, John.
Ben Kennedy at the White House, thank you. Though the president has strong support from evangelical Christians, there's a deep split over his approval among Catholic voters.
That's right. Real Clear Opinion Research and EWTN, the Catholic television network, conducted a survey of some 1,500 Catholic voters. Though the study found that President Trump's standing among all Catholics is stronger than it was last year, he still trails his Democratic rivals. About 1 in every 5 Catholics identifies themselves as devout. Voters for whom the church's teachings and practices play a huge part in their daily lives, and who tend to be much more conservative. Almost 2 out of the 3 plan to vote to re-elect President Trump. For many other Catholic voters, it's just the opposite. They tend to be more liberal on social issues and are more likely to vote for one of the Democratic candidates.
And here now to discuss the new poll is Matthew Bunson, executive editor and Washington bureau chief of EWTN News. Matthew, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Tell us, what did you find most interesting about this poll?
Well, if we're trying to decide or to determine where exactly Catholics are as we're heading into the very contentious 2020 election, one of those clear barometers is how Catholics live their lives, how engaged they are with the Catholic faith. And so the results were quite striking in the sense that the more you tend to be committed to the teachings of the Catholic faith, the more you're likely to be voting on some of the key moral and social issues of our time, but in particular, where you stand on Donald Trump.
Matthew, how strong of a voting bloc are we talking about with Catholic voters?
Well, there's always been an assumption that Catholics are this kind of monolithic voting bloc. In fact, it's incredibly diverse. Catholics, for the most part, look like average voters, their fellow Americans. Catholics have voted consistently with the winner of presidential elections for almost all of the elections in the last 60 years, with the exception, of course, of John F. Kennedy, who carried about 90-some% of the Catholic vote, unsurprisingly. But what we're seeing with Catholics today is that there is that subset that you were just talking about. It's about 18%, about a fifth of the Catholic vote, that lives and votes very differently from their fellow Catholics, and in many ways from their fellow Americans.
You were just talking about it not being a monolithic group, even though people might assume devout Catholics as such. So can you get into the weeds a little bit more and explain what this looks like as far as gender and all the other demographics within the
This is
Catholic
one of the most interesting and surprising takeaways, too, from this poll. We surveyed only Catholics this time. In our first poll back in November, December, we looked at all Americans and then at Catholics. This time we're looking only at Catholics, and in that group in particular. The assumption always is that this sort of devout Catholic group is going to be old, white, and male. What we found is that 52% are women, about 48% are under the age of 45, a third is under the age of 35, and it's 41% Latino or Hispanic. So it is a very surprising and diverse group of American Catholics.
Yeah. So because, more than half of this devout, diverse group backs the president, does this then just suggest that he's not just supported by older white men?
That's absolutely correct. And the fact that there is strong support for him among Latinos within that subset. Now, overall, the president does not do particularly well among Hispanic or Latino voters. But with this group, it is a kind of firewall within the Latino vote itself. But we're also seeing, because this is such a diverse group, that it cuts across all genders, age groups, education. So the president has his own, to use that term again, firewall among Catholic voters with this group. One of the key takeaways, too, with this is that 58% of Catholics vote consistently. 75% of devout Catholics vote consistently. So they are much more motivated, and they tend to vote on a much more regular basis.
So not a group that you can ignore.
Exactly. If the president's going to be reelected, he has to carry this group again, as he did in 2016.
Matthew, you hinted that this poll wasn't just about politics. Any surprises when it comes to the divide, as we hinted about, when you're looking at cultural issues and social issues?
Yes. What we found with this poll, as we saw with the first poll, is we assume, and have assumed for some time, is that there is a gulf within the Catholic community. Of those who follow the teachings of the Church tend to look at cultural and moral issues in one way. Those who don't look at it another way that, again, resembles the average public. What we found is that those who follow the teachings of the Church very closely are very strong in their opposition to abortion, to euthanasia, assisted suicide, the use of bathrooms by those who choose their own gender, on marriage between a man and a woman, whereas with those who are less committed to the teachings of the Church, they, again, on much lower levels, are in favor of abortion. The majority of them, in fact, consider abortion to be legal, that they support it. Same thing on euthanasia, same thing, again, on physician-assisted suicide.
It's complicated to be a candidate.
It really is. Hopefully they're paying attention to your survey.
Right.
Well, again, the Catholic vote in 2020, as it was in 2016, is going to be very tight. It's going to be very close for any candidate running. It's going to come down to a couple of points in either direction, and whoever can motivate that base. And Donald Trump at least has a leg up on his Democrat rivals. Now, let's stress again, he's trailing all of his Democrat rivals at this point, but 54% of all Catholics are open at least to voting for him. With the economy as strong as it is, and with so many Catholics across the board saying that they are better off financially and that the country is better off financially than it was 4 years ago, there's a lot of room for the president here.
And that's probably why his standing is higher than it was before.
All
right, Matthew Bunson, Washington Bureau Chief and Executive Editor of EWTN. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be with you.
Thanks. Well, today the Senate voted on two big pieces of pro-life legislation, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act and the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act.
For more on what these bills are and what they call for, we go now to our CBN Capitol Hill correspondent, Abigail Robertson. Abigail?
Well, John, the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act would prohibit abortions after 5 months of pregnancy, at which point there is scientific evidence that shows that babies in the womb can feel the pain of the abortion procedure. And 5 months is also significant because there are babies that have been born at that age and lived. Now, the second bill that they voted on, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, which Senator Ben Sasse tells me, who is introduced the bill, that it basically pretty much does exactly what the title says. Take a look.
It simply says that a baby that has survived an abortion is a baby and deserves a fighting chance at life, and that includes just as much medical care as you'd provide to a baby born at that same gestational stage if there were a mom and dad present who wanted to love on that baby.
And one thing I asked Senator Sasse about is, since there is a federal statute prohibiting infanticide already, why is this bill necessary? And here is what he says.
There is a federal statute that prohibits infanticide, but it turns out it doesn't have penalties associated with actually killing a baby, and it doesn't distinguish between active and passive killing. So right now, all that's really prohibited is if a baby survives an abortion, you can't take a pillow and put it over her face and smother her to death, but you can walk away from her and put her on a cart and wheel her down a hallway and put her in a closet and leave her to die of exposure over 6 or 8 or 10 hours. It's a horrific, barbaric practice known as stepping away or backing away and allowing a baby to die passively. And we should have federal protections that say, no, actually, you can't kill a baby either actively or passively.
Now, Democrats do not support either of these bills, and Republicans say that they are taking a very extreme stance by not doing so, and particularly with the pain-capable bill, where Republicans argue we are only one of 7 countries that allow abortions after 5 months of pregnancy, with some of the other countries being North Korea, China, and Vietnam. But Democrats said today that these bills are non-starters for them, with Minority Leader Chuck Schumer referring to them as fake and dishonest show votes. And when I asked Senator Schumer what his response to Senator Sasse's argument about why the Born Alive bill is necessary, this is what he said.
On the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, Senator Sasse argues this is needed because under the current law, while you can't outright kill a baby breathing outside the womb, you can neglect it. What is your response?
We voted on this before. It was defeated. And there's a law in 2002 that is on the books, current law, that covers everything Sasse is talking about. It's a play to the hard right base. The American people don't support it.
Now, Republicans believe that in a very heated election year, getting Democrats on the record on what they call extreme abortion views is going to help them in 2020, while Democrats argue again that these are just show votes, that the Senate needs to be doing real work instead of catering to the GOP's hard right base, and that the American people see through this. Back to you, John and Jennifer.
Abigail Robertson on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
Well, coming up, we preview tonight's Democratic debate. Stay tuned for the one and only David Brody for our Faith Nation political panel. Up next.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Welcome back. Here with us now for our Faith Nation political panel is our very own CBN News Chief Political Analyst, David Brody. Thank you for being with us, David.
Anytime, Jennifer. John.
Oh, thank you.
Of course, tonight's Democratic presidential debate, the last before the primary in South Carolina this weekend, the last before Super Tuesday, when 14 states will be voting. What's at stake tonight?
Well, it's the Bernie barrage tonight, and I think everybody's got to be trained on Bernie. We've heard the Buttigieg, Klobuchar fight over the center-left folks. We've heard about Biden's got to do it. Forget all that. Bernie barrage. Everybody's got to be all hands on deck against Bernie. Why? Because this is really, I believe, the last chance you're going to have. If you get to Super Tuesday, and Bernie's on track, by the way, in California, doing very, very well, and many other states, it could be a runaway. I'm not saying he's going to have the majority of delegates, but he would be this clear front runner in terms of delegates for sure after Super Tuesday. You've got to stop him now. And that's why every candidate on the stage has to show, can they stand up to Bernie and be the alternative to the socialist? The Democratic socialist.
You talk about every candidate, but Michael Bloomberg specifically, he's expected to come out swinging tonight, which is something the other candidates have really failed to do. They haven't landed their punches as of yet. Can he redeem himself after the damage that was inflicted in the last debate, or is that expected to kind of just stay with him?
Well, I think it's going to stay with him. I don't expect a new Bloomberg tonight other than some new strategy. And the strategy will be go against Sanders on gun control, and because Bernie has been pretty cozy, if you will, over the years with the NRA, so I think he'll bring that up. And then a few other things on the socialist trail. But look, Bloomberg is Bloomberg. I mean, he is the billionaire who just seems like, looks at his watch and says, when is this done? I don't think we're going to get the fire from Bloomberg. All of a sudden, he's going to be this different candidate. So his net favorability rating was down 20 points after that first debate. It was just, and so all of a sudden, he's going to be this new candidate tonight. He'll have some new lines, good for him. But I just don't think, I think that train has left the station. Remember, he's not a politician, so it's going to be hard for him to kind of, maneuver that and say, okay, I have to do this tonight. He's not like that.
Yeah. After a recent interview when Bernie Sanders couldn't explain how he was going to, well, he knew how he was going to pay for it, but he didn't know how much it cost, these trillions of dollars of new plans that he has. Well, he's put out a more detailed budget proposal, but does this help him or hurt him?
Well, it's going to hurt him a lot tonight because Biden's camp is already calling it fuzzy math. I mean, he's saying $17 trillion for Medicare for all over 10 years, and Biden's folks are like, wait a minute. $31 trillion, not $17 trillion. And, oh, by the way, how are you going to pay for it? And then he outlines how he's going to pay for it. And as I look into here, $3 trillion to avert climate disaster. What in the world does that mean exactly? So, of course, he may not be challenged that much on stage tonight by the other folks that, believe very strongly in global warming. But to just have kind of a generic $3 trillion to avert climate disaster, you're going to need to explain a little bit more in detail about how you're going to get to that number.
South Carolina is Joe Biden's firewall, speaking of the vice president. Are African-American voters going to stick behind him, or is his support going to splinter?
Well, the polls show that his support is way down. 19 points he's down among African-Americans in the last 3 weeks. Tom Steyer, by the way, up from 2 points to 24 points. Spending a lot of money down there. We can talk about Steyer in a moment, but if you want. But for Biden, look, 60% of the electorate in the South Carolina primary is African-American. So he has to do well, but he's down 19 points. And look, we've talked about this before, right? I mean, when you start to see a winner, whether it be Bernie or someone, you want to back the winner. That's kind of human nature. And Biden doesn't look like the winner so far in these primaries.
Quickly, you mentioned it. Tom Steyer in third place in South Carolina. He's spending a lot of money there, a lot of time there. What do you make of his rise in popularity?
Well, third place in South Carolina and number one in terms of spending money down in that state, and that's key. And he's also brought in a lot of African-American congressmen and a lot of donors as well. well, and he's kind of really put himself into that African American community down there, and he's done well.
David Brody, thank you.
You bet.
David.
Well, coming up, the issue that's prompting the Pentagon to ask for hundreds of billions of dollars and how it affects our national defense. That story when we come back.
Daddy,
Yeah, buddy.
how many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
Well, welcome back. The Pentagon is asking for a staggering $700 billion for its next defense budget.
While that may seem astronomical, experts say much is needed to ensure military readiness. It's a term we often hear, but what does it really mean? CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips is here with us to explain. Hello, Eric.
Yeah, Jennifer, $700 billion does sound like a lot of money, but basically what military readiness means is exactly what it says. Always being ready to defend our nation. That came into question recently when Defense Secretary Mark Esper wanted to move money from military projects to build the southern border wall. The resulting uproar wasn't political. It was concern that the military would not get what it needed to do its job.
Readiness means you are ready to carry out your assignment and fight on behalf of the nation immediately.
A Navy veteran of nearly 28 years, Rear Admiral Craig Quigley now leads the Hampton Roads Military and Federal Facilities Alliance. He says military readiness must be an ongoing priority.
If you're a pilot, you are proficient at flying your aircraft. If you're a ship or a submarine, it is well maintained. You have a well-trained crew. If it's a land unit, they know how to fight together, to maneuver together. It is maintenance, it is training, it is spare parts, it is not very sexy.
I'm here at Naval Station Norfolk, the largest Navy base in the world. Dozens of military ships like this one call this port home, and some 42,000 people show up to work here each and every day, supporting a Navy that is second to none in the world. And they plan to keep it that way. They stay on ready.
It is a discriminator that America's military is very ready to fight tomorrow, and that sets us apart on the world stage.
And that takes money.
We have invested a record-breaking $2.2 trillion in the United States military.
Still, the need for new equipment tends to eclipse the budget.
We have had 20 years of hard use of equipment that was purchased in the 80s and the 90s. You have a balancing act that you need to do to maintain what you have and still pay for a recapitalization of the force.
He says by and large, U.S. military leaders have been able to strike that balance while being relentlessly ready.
You wouldn't want it any other way. It's incredibly important.
Quigley adds that it's not only important for U.S. forces to be ready, but for our allies as well. He says it's why the president has been pushing NATO countries to meet their commitments to spend at least 2% of their nation's GDP on defense. Jennifer and John.
All right, thank you, Eric. Coming up, remembering the life and legacy of one of NASA's hidden figures at the core of human space travel.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
Finally tonight, a woman whose work on mathematical principles pioneered space flights has died.
The family of Katherine Johnson, who was 101 years old, announced her death Monday. Her work still, though, remains at the core of human spaceflight.
Katherine G. Johnson refused to be limited by society's expectations of her gender and race while expanding the boundaries of humanity's reach.
Johnson was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015 for her critical roles in NASA's most important milestones, from sending the first American to space to the first moon landing. The 2017 Oscar-nominated film Hidden Figures memorialized Johnson's work as a trailblazer for women and African Americans during the 1960 space race in what was then a new field of spaceflight. Trailblazer indeed.
Yeah, she contributed so much in so many ways.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
We'll see you tomorrow.